Good evening, everyone. For Telesur English, I'm Sarah Begum in Caracas, Venezuela. We start tonight in Russia, where Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro met with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Maduro spoke of the many agreements reached, adding that the two leaders agreed to action falling oil prices.
We
revised trade topics, commercial energy, agricultural, and food, all topics around infrastructure development and of the great housing mission and financing of its development. We talked about oil issues. We have agreed to extend the investment and participation of Russian companies in the Orinoco Belt and other projects.
Maduro also reiterated that the Venezuelan government is working to terminate the economic war by opposition groups who want to end the 15 years of revolution.
In the same distributional chains that run a campaign to say that these products are missing because of an economic model and of a revolutionary government. In Venezuela, it is the uprising of the bourgeoisie against a model of social justice, against a model of distribution of wealth that is just, the Bolivarian model.
And moving to Mexico, protesters burned an effigy of President Enrique Peña Nieto at a rally in the city of Ciudad Juarez. They called on police and the government to do more to solve the cases of women who have gone missing in the area. Protesters also held anti-Nieto banners and scuffled with police. Police responded by releasing tear gas and setting off fire extinguishers in a bid to disperse the protesters. The protests come as Peña Nieto is facing a political crisis over the large number of unsolved disappearances in the nation. In Chile, an explosion rocked the Los Leones metro station in Santiago on Wednesday. It has been reported that 2 blasts occurred, but the reasons are uncertain. The station was closed down with police and firefighters at the scene. Witnesses report 3 people whose faces were covered fled the scene in a vehicle. Moving to Honduras, where the militarization process of security forces continues with appointing of a military officer as head of police. We go to our correspondent Gerardo Torres.
For the first time in 20 years in Central America since the peace agreement, today in Honduras, Military General Julián Pacheco has been named Security Minister. He is now also the head of the police force that once again passes under the control of the armed forces. This kind of political decision was believed something of the past in the region when the democratic governments of the 1980s had promised that security and defense actions will be separated to stop any kind of political intervention from the armed forces. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
Thanks to Gerardo. And in Nigeria, leading human rights groups released satellite images claiming to show massive destruction by Boko Haram in what is feared to be the deadliest strike of the Islamist 6-year insurgency. These satellite images taken before and after the attacks that began on 3rd January offered a rare glimpse into the scale and brutality of the assaults by terror group Boko Haram. Hundreds of people are thought to have been killed in the latest attacks.
Over the last 12 months, we've really seen the conflict in northeastern Nigeria escalate. In 2014, we believe that more than 4,000 people were killed by the group, the overwhelming majority of whom are civilians. So this is really the latest in this series of attacks by the group and may in fact be the deadliest.
And in the United States, the government announces its easing of restrictions on Cuba. We go to Alexandra Hall in Washington.
On Thursday morning, the U.S. Departments of Commerce and Travel announced that some U.S. citizens will be allowed to travel to Cuba as early as Friday, according to new regulations. So who can go? Well, mainly family members of people who live in Cuba and also people on official business and government trips to the island, but it also includes journalists, researchers, and religious and humanitarian workers. These new regulations also increase the caps on remittances to Cuba from $500 to $2,000 every 3 months. You'll now also be able to use U.S. credit cards in Cuba, and it will also make it easier for telecommunications companies to do business on the island. Now, as of now, U.S. airlines still do not provide direct flights to Cuba, so anyone who plans to go in the coming hours or days will still need to travel through a third country. In Washington, I'm Alexandra Hall for Telesur.
French President François Hollande said that Muslims were the main victims of fanaticism, as 5 of the 17 killed in last week's Islamist attacks in Paris were laid to rest. Speaking at the Arab World Institute in Paris, Hollande added the whole country was united in the face of terrorism.
France is a friendly country, but France is a country with rules, principles and values. Among those values is one that is not up for negotiation and never will be, and that is freedom, democracy. At the same time, let me say to you that those Muslims living in France can be certain that they are united, protected and respected, just like they themselves must respect the Republic.
According to Russia, the Syrian opposition has multiple times been invited to the peace table, but refused. For more, we go to Nashwan Abdullah in Damascus.
On Wednesday, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov said that his country has invited more than 30 members of the Syrian opposition to take part in Moscow conference on the Syrian crisis. The meeting is scheduled to take place between the 26th and the 29th of January. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the Syrian anti-government groups would risk losing influence in peace efforts if they not assist the conference in Moscow. The US-backed so-called Syrian coalition has said it would go to the conference only if the talks would lead to the resignation of President Bashar al-Assad, which is the refused term from most of the Syrian people. The peace talks hosted by Russia are aimed at ending a 4-year conflict that has left a death toll of almost 200,000 while displacing about more than 9 million people, according to the United Nations. Nashwan Abdullah, Telesur, Damascus, Syria.
And for the latest on the Israeli attack on Palestine, we go to our correspondent Noor Harazin.
Israeli troops shot and injured a young Palestinian man when they raided the Jenin refugee camp in the northern area of the West Bank this Thursday. The actions that left 23-year-old Ahmed Jarboua injured have sparked new tension. Palestinian security sources and witnesses said the Israeli soldiers detained 4 young men during the raid. This prompted clashes between the soldiers and local youth. The Palestinians hurled stones and empty bottles at the soldiers, who responded with tear gas, stun grenades and rubber coastal bullets. In southern Gaza, Israeli troops fired from surveillance towers on Palestinian farmers that were working in their fields. No injuries have been reported, but the farmers were immediately forced to abandon their crops. Israeli soldiers usually open fire across borders almost every day, claiming that Palestinians come too close to the borderline. In many cases, Palestinian farmers have been killed or injured. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
The Senegalese government banned the dissemination of Wednesday's editions of the satirical French weekly Charlie Hebdo. They also banned the French daily Liberation, both of which put a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad on their front pages. No Senegalese newspapers or news sites have reprinted the controversial Charlie Hebdo cover. The magazine's first edition since 2 Islamist gunmen attacked its Paris offices last week, killing 12 people. More on these and other stories on our website telesortv.net/English. For Telesor English, I'm Sarah Begum. Good night.